Now that you have a better understanding of what ARE is, let's move into some exercises to help you put these principles into practice. These will help you identify some of the patterns in your relationship, mainly your primary pattern that happens when you aren't able to attune and connect to one another. And we're going to give you tools to strengthen that sense of security.
We all have cycles that we fall into, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed emotionally. The most common is the pursue withdraw cycle. Do you ever feel like you're chasing after your partner for connection only for them to pull away? Do you feel like you need a bit of space sometimes when you're in the heat of disconnection? Or maybe you just get into a loop where one of you criticizes and the other defends.
These patterns are super common and they happen to most couples at some point. In fact, there's a great therapist that's part of the emotionally focused therapy model that we're talking about, who is one of the founders that says all it takes to get into one of these patterns is to really love someone. So if you're caught in one of these patterns, that makes you human. So the important thing to recognize when you're in one of these cycles is how to break free from it. Spend a few minutes with your partner now talking about which of these patterns you see in your relationship.
Okay, so ask each other things like, when do we get stuck?
Mhm.
How do we react when we're stressed or upset? And remember, this is about understanding. It's not about blaming.
Mhm.
So we found what helps in this conversation is to imagine that you're both sitting beside one another, looking at your relational pattern together. Okay, so helpful hint, don't answer for your partner. I know this is tempting, but don't answer for them because they need to be able to say what they need to say, and you need to be able to say what you need to say. But let's not do it for each other because that could lead to arguments or no, that's not me, those kinds of things. So let's keep it to each person responding for their own selves.
Yeah, that's really good. Once you finish this exercise, we want you to go ahead and try out the quiz linked right here for you. And then there's lots of great information about what your sort of pattern might look like in your relationship.
Sweet.
Awesome. All right. So, what we found is going to be super helpful is Chris and I are going to demonstrate these exercises and conversations for you. So, what happens for you is going to look a little bit different than what these conversations are going to look like for Chris and me, because your relationship is going to be unique to you. And what you're making a map of, what you're charting out is your particular relationship. So, cool other helpful hint for you when it comes to patterns like this is there's really only just two ways that you're going to show up in these moments of disconnection. Either you're going to kind of turn the heat up or you're going to want to kind of move away from that heat. And so some of this is really just understanding a bit more from like a bird's eye view, 30,000-foot view. We're kind of zooming out just to look overall at the most basic level of what happens in these moments of disconnection. So that this isn't the module where we're going to dive deep internally. That's going to be tomorrow. Today, we're just looking at what happens between us in like even an uncomfortable moment. It doesn't even have to be like a big, massive conflict. It really is what Chris was talking about in these moments of kind of wobbles or disconnection in your nervous system, the way that you're feeling doesn't feel quite as secure as you did. You're going to have one or like a couple ways that you move in order to try and get yourself back to either a good place or back to a more peaceful, conflict free
Yeah,
kind of a zone.
sounds good.
So, we're just going to chat a little bit about what this looks like for us. So this is kind of the way that I would recommend coming into the conversation would be, hey, Chris, is this a good time right now for us to do our exercises from the Catalyst Challenge?
Okay,
Does
sounds
that
good.
sound
Yeah,
okay?
sounds good to me.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about the pattern that happens between us in a moment where maybe it doesn't feel as secure
Great.
between the two of us. So, another hint that can happen is if you're having trouble just kind of talking theoretically, you can talk about a specific instance that's happened recently that maybe you still have a little bit of the residual in you. You don't have to do it that way. But we're going to use like a recent example. And I wouldn't use the most intense version if you can.
Mhm.
It'll be easier to talk about it if it's not like the worst thing that's ever happened in your relationship here.
Yeah, okay.
So let's talk about the other morning when we both were gonna sit down and maybe we were gonna have like a bit of a conversation and you were doing something and I didn't realize that you were working and I kind of interrupted your workflow.
Yeah.
What I noticed is there was like a shift
Mhm.
and it was like it kind of annoyed you or something.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then all of a sudden my alarm bells were like going off and we were off to the races.
Yeah.
So, the first thing that I notice for me is I want to go push even closer to you. I want to figure out what's going on. I want to ask a lot of questions. I want to know what happened to you. Why did you shift in that way? And if you notice, I get more energy
Mm.
and I have this push. And sometimes I know that my voice can kind of shift to like maybe even a sharper tone. And I can get a little bit critical and kind of push and get a little critical. I'm pushing and have this urge that maybe we could do something like put energy in to fix the problem or focus on it and it would get better.
Mhm.
But what tends to happen is almost sometimes I think gives you the message I'm trying to like fix you or it's like your
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah.
How about for you?
Yeah, so when that situation happened, I was working, and then when you asked me about it, it did seem like a little bit of an interruption because I was kind of in a flow.
Yeah.
So I came up out of it a little. I know it looked annoyed, but at
Mhm.
first it was confused, and there's a little annoyance, to be
Sure.
honest, there as well.
Yeah.
But when then I felt that response from you, that tone felt a little critical, at least the way that it hit my ears. I wanted to like retreat and like, oh, no,
Yeah.
what did I do? I want to
Yeah.
back up here and figure out what's going on because I don't want to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. And
Mhm.
so I kind of freeze looking for the right thing to do in the moment.
Yeah. And then the more that you freeze or pull away, I get more like panicked and then I'm going
Mhm.
to come harder after you. But then the more that I kind of pursue after you, what happens to you?
I just doubled down on needing
Yeah.
more space because now I feel more pressure and what feels like annoyance from you. And so I want to make it right. But
Yeah.
while I do, I'm backpedaling,
Yeah.
which seems like it gives you the message that I don't want to be there, which makes you want to pursue more, which makes me want to retreat more.
Yeah. And then you could see like round and round we go.
See how it would turn into
Yeah.
something out of like it's just a
Nowhere.
disagreement or a misunderstanding, and how sometimes that turns into a fight. I'm sure that none of you out there know what I'm
It's just
talking
us.
about. Yeah. That's how it happens. It's like those little things where then I start to withdraw a bit, which makes her feel like she wants to pursue a bit more, which makes me want to double down on my withdrawal, makes her want to pursue even harder. So
All right. Now it's your turn.
go.
You've got this. Just make sure if you start to feel a bit intense or if you start getting into it, that you can just take a breath, take a moment, sit back, and then come back to the work again when you maybe feel like you've got a little bit more space. And if you need anything, please send us a message. We are here to help and support you in any way we can.
Good
All right.
reminder.
Have fun. See you at the next exercise.